This is Between the Uprights. Football is life. The rest is just details. Here are your hosts, Joe, Matt, and Chris.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Between the Uprights. I am here with Chris. My name is Matt. And just real quick, before we get into all this Week 12 NFL discussion, be sure to subscribe to the channel for us. We are just starting this thing up here at Between the Uprights. We love football. We love the NFL. And if you're seeing this, you probably do too. So if you like what you see, hitting that subscribe button would be extremely clutch for us. We would greatly appreciate it. And thank you in advance. Now, the Miami Dolphins have rattled off 3 straight wins after starting 2-6. They now sit at 5-6 and are 1 game back of that, or 1.5 games back, of the Denver Broncos for the AFC's final wildcard spot after a dominating performance against the Patriots on Sunday. Tua is healthy, and this offense is back and clicking. Another big game from Devon Achane. Jalen Waddle broke out and put up a huge game, his biggest game of the season, and Jonnu Smith continues his really nice season as well. So that has us talking. Hell, it's got the streets talking. It's got the people talking. It's got the NFL universe talking, Chris, about if the Miami Dolphins can take this final AFC spot down the stretch. So, Chris, I got to ask, do the Miami Dolphins continue their winning ways and take the AFC's final playoff spot?
Let me tell you, I think so. So when I look at it, I look at right now where they're at. So their current record right now is a 5-6, right? Like I said, they've already come off with three wins. So they're already kind of on track to continue their way since getting their QB back. One thing that stands out to me is the strength of the remaining schedule. They are probably bottom 5 almost, and how strong the remaining part of their schedule is, which sets them up for a good run, because their only 2 big time games that they have to worry about right now is Green Bay, and they have listed as the Houston Texans. Those are the only 2 that you really have to worry about. And quite honestly, I feel like out of those 2, only one, which is upcoming this Sunday, is against the Green Bay Packers. Other than that, I don't feel like the Houston Texans are going to do much with the way that this team is running right now. I think their defense is finally coming to play. I think, like you said, the offense is now back running. So there's a lot to love and a lot to look at when it comes to them. So I don't think the Texans are going to do much with them. I think the Packers is going to be their biggest. If they get through the Packers, which I am going to go on a thing I don't normally do, I'm gonna go on it. I think they're going to take out the Packers.
Wow.
So you have the Packers, you have the Texans, and then their other games are the Browns. They have 2 against the Jets. I won't go there. And then they have a struggling 49ers. Those are the only games that they have left. And I definitely think they might pull a run and clear them out. So if you're looking at that, as right now, they could possibly, even if they lose 1 out of those last 6 games, you're looking at probably 10-7. Right now, you have a Broncos team at 7-5, and I don't think it's too much to think that they might just kick them out of that playoff spot and take it. And then I'll even go on a bigger want to say, if you start looking at who's already kind of in the hunt or who's in the race, they're listed at number 1 right now as far as like who's in the hunt, right? Because they're not that far out, so they're really 1 under the Broncos right now at number 8. And then if you put them into a wild card spot, which I fully believe that they're going to end up getting into with the way that they've been handling the ball on both sides, don't take me out. Don't take me out. But I will say, depending on who they get, if they get a certain team in the wild card, if you're looking at a Chargers, if you're looking at maybe the Steelers, if the Ravens take over that spot in their division, I don't see a lot of distraction as far as saying that they could possibly make it to the divisional round, and they may just be kind of a wild card to get into the championship for the AFC. So I definitely am not going to rule them out. And if it's my opinion, which no one cares about, my opinion is that they're absolutely going to make it to the playoffs, and they might get into a hot run when they hit it.
Yeah, listen, the Dolphins, like you just talked about, they've been on an amazing run. They look like they're back to how they were at the beginning of last year and the beginning of the year before that. But Chris, I'm going to tell you something, and we talked about this pre-show. I'm so glad to have you back. I'm so glad you're back and healthy and feeling great.
Same.
But I could not disagree with you more on a topic than I disagree with you on this one. There is no chance in hell the Miami Dolphins are making the playoffs this year, and I've got a number of reasons for it. First of all, okay, when coming to this decision, okay, I incorporated a lot of factors when coming into this decision, okay? The first one I always take into account is coach and quarterback. I always look at your coach, I always look at your quarterback. And no doubt Miami has a good coach and a good quarterback. Tua is a good quarterback. We saw that when Tua was out, and whenever Tua's been out, this offense goes downhill tremendously. They look horrible whenever Tua's out. So, and when he's in, they look great. So Tua is no doubt a good NFL quarterback. He's not great, though. He's a good NFL quarterback. I wouldn't say he's great. He's not on the Mahomes, Lamar, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. I don't even think he's on the Matthew Stafford tier. I think he's a good NFL quarterback. I think he's solid. Somewhere in that 10 to 12 range is where I would put Tua. I would put Mike McDaniel in that same level of coaches, somewhere in that 10 to 12 range. He's a good coach. He's not a great one. I've seen some situations handled poorly by him. I've seen some things that I haven't liked from Mike McDaniel. As far as game score, timeouts wise goes, and situational stuff goes, I've seen some stuff that I don't like from Mike McDaniel. So I think he's a good but not great head coach. Another thing that I took into account was, how do you beat good teams? Can you beat good teams as far as the Miami Dolphins go? The resounding answer for the Miami Dolphins over the last basically since Tua and McDaniel got there is no, okay? The Dolphins' strength of victory this year is 262, okay? Only two teams have a lower strength of victory than the Miami Dolphins. That's the Bengals and the Panthers, okay? Two other bad teams in the NFL right now. As much as we don't want to believe the Bengals are a bad team, they're a bad team, okay? Two other bad teams in the NFL. So they don't beat any good teams. You look at the teams they beat this year, with like the Giants, the Raiders, like the Patriots twice. They haven't beat anybody good, okay? But to your point, Chris, their schedule is light, okay? They play at Green Bay, then it's home to the Jets, it's at Houston, home to San Francisco, at Cleveland, at the Jets, okay? So some of those games would have scared you a little bit preseason. Right now, those games do not look as scary anymore. The Niners don't look as scary. We're going to talk about that here pretty soon. The Jets are obviously not scary anymore based on what they've done. The Cleveland's not very scary anymore. Houston isn't as scary as you'd like them to be. But my next issue with the Dolphins is, we see this all the time with the Miami Dolphins. They have some sort of hot streak, whether it's at the beginning of the year or whether it's now kind of in the middle of the year. And then always at the end of the year, in these Tua and Mike McDaniel years, they falter every single year. 2022 was the first Tua and Mike McDaniel year. They start 8-3. What happens after they start 8-3? They lose 5 of their last 6. 4 of those games were with Tua before he got hurt. And then they ended up sneaking into the playoffs with a Week 18 win versus the Jets with Skylar Thompson at quarterback. And then they lost to Buffalo in round 1. Okay, so and when they were playing this that year as well, as far as strength of victory goes, they did have a solid strength of victory, which was 12th best in football. But still, it's not like they were beating a bunch of juggernauts. Okay, they weren't beating a ton of great teams on their way there. Okay. Last year, everybody should remember last year still, okay? It literally happened 1 year ago, okay? They started 9-3, and then after week 13, they had a 3-game lead on the Buffalo Bills. They were 9-3, and Buffalo was 6-6. They ended up losing 3 of their last 5, including a home game to Buffalo in Week 18 with the division on the line, okay? Then they got bounced in round 1 by the Chiefs. And last year, to my strength of victory point, they were the worst in the AFC and 4th worst in the NFL. They did not beat a single good team last year. They were beaten up on some bums last year. And then this year, it's the exact same thing. The 3rd worst strength of victory in football, one of the worst in the AFC, the 2nd worst in the AFC. They aren't beating good teams. And by the way, okay, Chris, you know what time of year it is? What time of year is it? We're getting close to Thanksgiving, right? It's Thanksgiving. It's Christmas, okay? What happens in Thanksgiving and Christmas in places that I currently am not at, because I live on Maui, Hawaii. It's nice and warm and sunny out here. Places that I'm not at in November, in December, in January, it gets cold. It gets really, really cold. You want to know what Tua's stats are in cold weather? Not very good, Chris. 0-7 when the temperature drops below 40 degrees, okay? And I'm originally from Alaska. 40 degrees ain't even that cold, all right? If you think 40 degrees is cold, it's not that cold. Tua's going to experience some real cold in Green Bay on Thursday night on Thanksgiving. It's going to be a high of 32. Game time should be in the low 20s, 18-mile-per-hour winds, 24% chance of snow. Yes, Chris, I put on my meteorologist hat for all of this, okay? And it's going to be a real feel of 9 degrees on Thursday, okay? So it is going to be a really, really cold game. And then, to the cold point, they also finished the year at the Jets and at Cleveland, which normally you would pencil in as wins. But guess what? In New York, at the end of December, it's going to be cold. At Cleveland, at the beginning of January, it's going to be cold. And Tua has yet to win a cold game in the NFL. So, Chris, to all of these points that I wanted to lay out, there is no way, with all of that considered, I am going to pick the Miami Dolphins. And to bolster my point even more, what's one of the biggest factors in the NFL as far as wins and losses go? Injuries. What team is going to be affected most by injuries down the stretch if their quarterback, I'm going to knock on wood for him here, gets hit in the head? I don't want to see him get hit in the head. Or if he just has another injury, if he has a high ankle sprain, if he pulls a quad, if something like that, we see how they look when Tua is not in there, So injuries are going to impact this team more than any if it hits Tua. So I just don't see any way that I'm going to trust the Miami Dolphins given all of that information down the stretch.
Here's what I'll tell you. Like, there's a lot you said that I can agree with for sure, but I'm not going to rule him out. Just because it's cold doesn't necessarily mean that he's enabled. Maybe he has it in the past. Doesn't necessarily mean he's not going to do it this year. But my biggest thing is always going to be the strength of their remaining schedule. So right now, the people who are the teams that are scheduled to be in the playoffs as of right now are the Chargers, the Ravens, the Broncos, right? So the Chargers just lost to the Ravens. So they are currently 7-4 right now, I believe. They have a 16 remaining schedule. So they're basically almost top half. Same thing goes for the Ravens. They're in the top 10 level, and the Broncos are in the top 12 as far as how the strength of their remaining schedule is. I feel like I don't care what anybody else says. Again, y'all like it is what it is. But it is not going to be that hard for them to knock the Broncos or potentially the Chargers out of playoff contention. It's not going to be that difficult based on what they have left. Now, given, yes, it's going to be some cold games that he has to go to, but this is going to be the point where he has to put on his big boy pants and show people exactly who he is, because he's been talking trash the last couple weeks. If anybody has watched it, in a lot of his interviews, he's been talking a lot of trash about how, what he's been getting from the media and that he loves it. He loves basically proving people wrong. Well, now is that time. So I'm not going to rule them out. I feel like they have a fair chance, especially with who they have on that side of the ball. I think their defense is finally starting to show up, where towards the beginning of the year, even if anybody that plays fantasy had them, they will be well aware that was a rough couple weeks until you dropped them. It was rough to watch their defense go the way that they were going. But I feel like they've kind of find their stride now that they got their quarterback back. Their offense is finding their stride. My only concern outside of yours and the weather, apparently, is their running game. That to me has to increase, specifically, just as you said, because it's going to be cold. So you need to have your running back ready to go for each game for the rest of the season, because it is going to get cold. And that's the best way to get through the cold, is to make sure that your running game is on key so you don't have to throw the ball as much. So if they get through that, I don't see it being so unrealistic that there's one of those teams that they could knock out. They're right there. They're not far. And they're on a trend where there are a couple other teams, like I just said, the Chargers, Ravens, Broncos, who are kind of on the edge, right? I'm not even going to say the Ravens. I'm not even going to leave that in there. They proved to me last night. I'm going to leave that alone completely. But when you start talking about, we'll say Steelers, right? So Steelers, Chargers, Broncos, it's not hard to see them kicking somebody out and getting into the wild card and seeing what they can do in the wild card, which is going to be a whole nother conversation as far as how far they can go with that. So I'm not ruling them out. I think if it's up to me at this grand time, my overall thought is that they will make the playoffs as a wild card, and they have a really good chance depending on who they get set up with. Now, if it's a big name, if it just happens to be the Bills, I'm not saying they're probably getting out of the wild card, but depending on who they get set up with, if it happens in their favor, I can see them potentially getting to the divisional round if they continue playing how they've been playing for the past couple weeks. Sorry.
No, I mean, listen, what you said there is fair. I'm not going to pretend like what you said there isn't fair. It's all fair points. But first of all, okay, Broncos fans already don't like us based on how they've been commenting about our Broncos video. Don't just speed past the Broncos like you can just. I know, I didn't.
I was talking about him being
They were mad at us, Joe. You got some splaining to do, dog. They were mad at you, man. We were over here chilling.
I didn't say nothing.
but they're already mad at us. So I don't want to piss them off anymore because they're already pissed off at us. So, but to your point about the three teams that you mentioned, right? You mentioned Steelers, you mentioned Broncos, you mentioned Chargers. For those three teams, I trust their coaches way more than I trust Mike McDaniel. I trust Sean Payton and his team down the stretch. I definitely trust Mike Tomlin, although their schedule does get rough down the stretch. But I definitely trust Mike Tomlin, and especially they're already 8-3. They would have to have a real collapse to really, get them find themselves outside of the playoffs. And then I trust Jim Harbaugh too, from what I've seen from Jim Harbaugh, both NFL and college, as far as him being just probably one of the best football coaches on the planet as far as overall football coaching goes. So I don't see any of those three teams really having a big time fall off. And then, like I said, with Miami, they have these late season struggles. Is when the weather starts getting colder, we start seeing them fade a little bit more and a little bit more. So, Chris, we're just going to have to agree to disagree on this one, because I'm going to have to see it to believe it with the Miami Dolphins as far as them putting together a run down the stretch. But it's going to be interesting to see. Miami's definitely got a talented team, and we're going to see how they put it together here down the stretch.
This has been Between the Uprights. Football is life. The rest is just details.